Welcome to my first episode, Catfish Todd Murphy. Keep it simple tonight. I just want to go over some basic stuff when it comes to catfishing. A lot of stuff that people um, either A, just don't know, um, or B, just really don't care to know. But it'll help you catch more catfish. Now, I'm more into the big game catfishing, and what I mean by that is 15 pounds and up. I'm not really into the smaller eating size unless I'm going to do a fish fry, but I just want to go over the basics um, of big game catfishing, but also to let people know it's not as hard as it seems to go out there and catch you a nice sized catfish. Um, just for instance, this week, I've been out 3 days. Um, Day one, I caught 9. The smallest one was 16 pounds. The biggest one was 36. Day 2, I caught 4, and they all was between the 15 and 20 pound range. And then day 3, only caught 1, but it was 24 pounds and some odd ounces. So good fishing. Just want to show you the rods and reels that I have and how you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money buying these. I have name brand rods and reels, but $300-400 for a setup. Most of I got 10 catfish rod and reels, and I'm in all of them for under $100 a piece. So you don't have to go out and spend, because I've seen rods online going for $200-300 and reels going for $150-200. You don't have to have that. So I just want to show you. I'm not going to say cheap. They're still not cheap, but cheaper ways to go about having the right rods and reels to go big game catfishing. Setups that I use. But first I'll get through some of my rods. This is a Silver Cat catfish rod, 7-foot rod, medium heavy. And I actually just bought this one today. I haven't used this one yet, but I do have one in the car. Very good rod. Abu Garcia Silver Max open face. This is 75-80 bucks, I believe, for the rod and reel combined. And like I said, these rods and these reels, like I said, my biggest catfish is 46 pounds, and this is the size that I use, and I got it in no problem. So that was one. And one that I really like, this is just a Berkley big game catfish rod. And again, it's a medium heavy 7-foot rod. And this is just a Shakespeare ATS lever action bait caster. And I really, really recommend these if you like throwing bait casters. If you don't like throwing bait casters, or you're just not good at throwing bait casters, this is not the one you want to buy, because you will backlash it. If you sling these, or when I say sling, cast, if you try to cast them too hard, when you push that level down, that's when you cast it. But if you sling it too hard, it'll automatically kick it up, and then that bait will come right back at you. So again, if you're not comfortable with a bait caster, this is not for you. But if you are comfortable, this is a $40 reel that has the clicker on it. And this is one of the main reasons why I like it. Is after I cast it, that little silver circle button, after I cast it, I'll put it in the rod holder, push it forward, okay? What that does is, once you got it out there, you hear that noise? That's what you're gonna hear when a catfish takes off, or a striper. A lot of times I catch stripers using cut bait, but that's a feature that I really like, because there's a lot of times that you're going to be away from your rod, and if you don't hear it, probably not going to know one's on there, but you will hear that. And this is another rod that I have. This is an Ugly Stick catfish rod, again, medium heavy, and this is actually an old open face Berkley that I have. I've had this a long time. This thing's probably almost done, but we'll see how much longer it has. Again, those 3 rod and reels, you're going to be in those for around $100 or less, depending on where you live at and what kind of deal you can get on them. But now I want to get to styles of fishing. Right now it's May, so a lot of your catfish are going to be a little bit more shallower than they're going to be this summer when the water gets warm. They're going to try to get back out in the deeper water. Right now, you can catch them early, especially early in the mornings, late in the evenings, and especially when it gets dark, feeding on the banks. So let me go over this time of year. This is what I prefer. This is my bread and butter. This is what I catch most of my catfish on. I call them a Billy Bob float. Some people may call them something else, but that's what it is right here. Okay, you got a weighted bottom. I put a bead on. Okay, now when you buy these, it's going to come with a string that goes on above your float, and that sets your depth. Once you put it on there, you pull both lines opposite, and it tightens it onto the string or onto your line, and it slides up and down that line, and you can set your depth. I don't use those. I use these right here, and I don't know if you can pick it up on the video or not, but those are rubber bobber stoppers. Those are very easy to put on, and it goes through your eyes a lot easier. And you can actually reel these into your spool, and it doesn't affect your cast. That's why I like these. It goes through your eyes easier, so if you're having to fish a little bit deeper and this runs into your spool, it doesn't affect your casting at all. If you're using a bait caster, it's not gonna backlash it, and obviously it does really well in an open face. But that's what I use, is a rubber bobber stopper. But the string that comes with this works good too. You just have to, once you get it tight, you have to cut the ends off, and it'll still go through your eyes. It just won't last as many casts. These rubber bobber stoppers, every 2 to 3 fishing trips I'll change one out, and you can get a pack of 10 for about $2, so it's not expensive. The reason I like these, especially this time of year, spring, early summer, is because they're feeding, especially early in the mornings, late in the evenings, in shallow water. So what you want to do is you want to go out there, find the spot you're wanting to fish at. Use if you're in a boat, or you can use your anchor to figure out how deep it is, or if you're fishing from the bank, you can cast out with with just a sinker on there, just to kind of get an idea how deep it is. And you want to set that up to be as close as you can to about a foot off the bottom. You don't want it to hit the bottom. If it is touching the bottom, that's fine, but you really want it to be above the bottom, at least 6 inches to a foot. And you don't want it to be, really, in my opinion, above 2 foot off the bottom. That 6 inch to a 1.5 foot range is about where you want to be at. But how you put these on. Okay, so just forget that I got this swivel and hook on there. All right. If you're gonna go with the string instead of the bobber stopper to set your depth, you're gonna put it on first. So basically, you'll run it on first, cinch it, and then you're gonna put this bead on second, because if that string and this bobber stopper will go right through that hole. Okay, so you put your string or your rubber bobber stopper on first, and then you put a bead on. And what that bead's gonna do is gonna keep it from going through the hole on the top of the Billy Bob float. Because if you don't put this on, obviously, if it goes in, then your depth's gonna be off. So string or bobber stopper, and then you want to use a bead to keep it from going, obviously, inside of the float. But figure out your depth, and because that's key. But once you get that on, then obviously I got me a swivel with a hook attachment on there. I love those. Using a 6/0 hook, where I was fishing at yesterday, that was 10 to 20 pound catfish in that little cove was about what I was catching. That's a perfect hook for that 6/0. I prefer an 8/0 hook, especially when I'm big game catfishing. But getting back to the billy bob float, find out your depth. Okay, cast out there, figure out how deep it is. One reason why I like the bead, and this is just kind of a little cheat sheet right here. If you're fishing with a billy bob float and you think that you've got the depth set right, if it's touching the bottom, this bead will not touch the billy bob float. Okay, it's gonna stay off of it. I mean, if you're off that much or if you're off this much, if you got it set too deep to where it's hitting the bottom, and you'll see this, that's why I use it. It's visible. It won't be touching this top of the billy bob float. Okay, because I use cut bait. Okay, if you got the depth set right, or at least set to where it's not touching the bottom, this is going to be touching the float. Because what this float's going to do, it's going to rise up. And that's going to hit it. And that's when you know that you're not on the bottom. If you're on the bottom, it's going to be touching. Or it's not going to be touching. Excuse me. If you're fishing with these floats and you see this bead not touching the top of this billy bob float, then you know that you're fishing the bottom and you need to pull it back out and you know, shorten your depth up a little bit until you got it to where this bead is touching. Bead's touching, your bait's floating. It's not on the bottom. That's what you're looking for. Now, I use cut bait. Usually when I go, I got 4 bags of brim in the freezer. I probably got 40 brim in the freezer. I don't use the tail section. I'll cut the tail off. Obviously use the head and then the body. But when you're using these, it doesn't matter if you're using the float or if you're bottom fishing. But if you're using cut bait and you're using the head, obviously you want to hook them somewhere around the eyes. You want to hook them through the eyes of the head. The body piece, you want to hook it through the top of the fin. That's going to help, obviously, keep it on the hook. Yeah, fishing with a brim head, you know, you can pretty much hook it anywhere because there's so much muscle and tissue there. It's hard to throw a brim head off a hook. But I would recommend somewhere around the eyes is where you want to hook it at, and the body piece on the dorsal fin, you want to hook it right through it. And I like these because obviously when one of these go under, I'll show you the difference. And again, a lot of people watching this already knows the difference, but for those who don't catfish with floats, this is what I use when I go crappie fishing, okay? Now you see the difference here. All right, when this thing goes under, when you're out there and this thing goes under, that fish is on, okay? Because this is pretty heavy. I don't know the exact weight of it, but it's pretty heavy. And it actually, in my opinion, I think it helps preset the hook for you. But again, with using this, 1, make sure your depth is right. 2, even in the wind, it's not going to move as much as the float I just showed you, a brim float or a crappie float. If the wind's blowing when you're using a crappie float, it's just going to blow it everywhere. But one of these billy bob floats, it can withstand the wind a little bit more. And pretty much what I mean by that is it's going to stay in that area longer than your normal float would be. The normal float's just going to go across. Now, I have fished in wind before. When it gets, 15, 20 miles an hour and above, then obviously these floats are going to move pretty quick. But we don't get many days where we have wind like that. But when you're fishing with these, always remember, even though these floats will stay pretty much where you cast it at, it might move some with the wind, but not too much. The line is going to move, so you're going to have a U in your line. So if the wind is blowing right to left, you're going to have a U in it. When you see that float go under, it's easy. I've done it before. To pick that rod straight up and try to set the hook, but what you got to remember is when that line is U'd out in the water, laying on top of the water, that's obviously slack. So if you try to set the hook too early with one of these floats, okay, and they're slacking a line, you go up and pull it, you're going to pull that bait 99% of the time right out of its mouth. Wait. I know it's tempting to go ahead and pull it. Wait until that line gets straight and your rod starts shaking as if you was fishing on the bottom. That's when you want to pick the rod up and go with it. I don't like messing with the rod until I see it shaking, because especially with these floats, I'll see it go under. I'll go ahead and pick the rod up. I won't set it, waiting on it to get straight. Sometimes I'll pick it up and I'll move that line just a little bit. You don't realize you're moving the line and you pull the bait right out of its mouth. But wait till that line gets straight and that rod is just a shaking, and then you set your hook on it. Okay, because I ain't gonna say I've seen a lot of people do it, but I know myself I've done it. As soon as I see that float go under, boom, I pick it up, set it. With all that slack, I pull it right out of its mouth. Let it straighten itself up, let the line get tight, let the rod shake for a second, then get up and set your hook. That's a really good way to fish, especially this time of year. Temperatures are starting to get up into the 70s, 80s. Water temperatures are coming up, and especially late at night, or I'd say not late at night, but that 6 to 9 o'clock range, where you can still see these floats. Now they make these floats that's go in the dark, and they work really well, and I'll use them at night from time to time. But I usually mainly use these floats in the daytime. But anyways, make sure your line's tight. But like I said, the fish this time of the year, this is getting towards the end of May. June's coming soon. These fish are going to be in shallow water. So, 90% of the time I'm fishing in 5 to 10 foot of water right now, this time of the year. Catching, good sized catfish. I mean, this past week I caught a 42 pounder in not even 5 foot of water, fishing a main lake. Just found a cove that a creek fed into this cove. I knew the bait fish was coming out of that creek, and I knew that fish were coming into this cove because it was shallow and the water was warm. And once they got in there, they would pick up on the bait fish coming out of this creek, so I felt like it was a good spot. So I'd actually set my floats about 3.5 feet, throw it out there. Ended up catching 6 good-sized catfish. Like I said, it's not hard. If there's a lot of people who go out catfishing, especially, because there's times I like to take my kid to the pay lakes because I know they're going to probably catch something, and they have fun catching fish. But for those who just struggle on these main lakes and rivers catching catfish, especially decent-sized catfish, it's not as hard as you think it is. And when I first got into it, big game catfishing, I wasn't catching anything. And I started watching Catfish Dave. He taught me a lot. But the reason I'm doing this channel is because, like I said before, there's just not a lot of people that's willing to sit down and explain. And like I said before, not how simple it is, but it's not as difficult as you may think. And fishing with these floats this time of year is a really, really good idea. I always take at least 2 rods with me. I keep all of them in the car, so I got 10 with me at all times. But I'll take one with the float, and I'll take one for bottom fishing. And I don't really like to get above 2 rods. I mean, I'll fish with 3 rods from time to time. I'll see guys out there with 4 or 5 rods, and you may get 2 or 3 hits, and you can't get to them. So I like to keep it at 2 rods, and maximum 3. But buy you one of these Billy Bob floats. I'm gonna do a video later on from the beginning on how to get this thing set up. It's not difficult, and you'd be surprised how successful you can be with these floats. And I know if you go to pay lakes, I know you see a lot of people using them, and a lot of people think that, man, there's no way you can catch catfish on floats, but you can, especially with these, and catch some big ones. So that's one. way, float fishing. Now getting back to my forte, bottom fishing. I know people talk about Santee rigs, Carolina rigs, all these other rigs. I like to keep it simple. I mean, I'll use a Santee rig, but for the most part, I haven't caught any more fish with a Santee, and I haven't caught less fish with using, the setup that I use. That's all the weights I need. When I'm going fishing in the lake, especially if it doesn't have a lot of current, that's about all you need. Both of those weights together it's 1 ounce. And you know, um, I'll get to the weight part in just a second. But anyways, so I got my weights tied to a swivel, and which is 15-pound test. That's what I use on pretty much all my rods, is 15-pound test. So I got weights, bead, weight, tied to a swivel. Then I got 30-pound test braided line going down to this swivel with a detachable hook. And I really recommend these right here, because you'll get out there, and there's times I've got to where I was missing fish, and you might be in the area where there's not a lot of big catfish. There's your 5 to 15-pound range catfish, and using an 8/0 hook on those, probably gonna be hard to land them. So the reason I say use these is they're not expensive, and you can change your hooks out. So if you get in an area where you're missing fish, you're getting bites, but they're not running with it, your hook may be too big, or your hook may be too small, and all you have to do is just pop this thing right here, pop it out, and you can change your hooks out, and use whatever size you need for the situation that you're in. But anyways, like I said, 2 weights, that's 1/2 ounce weights, so that's 1 ounce in total. I got the bead in the middle tied to a swivel, and I got my 30-pound braided test line, and this is a 6/0 hook. That's a hook I would recommend. Those can still land your eating size catfish. That is, obviously that's not what I'm going after, but they're also laying your bigger catfish. Most of the time when I'm cut bait fishing or using live bait, like live brim or something of that nature, I'm using an 8/0 hook. But 6, 7, 8 is about my range. I know people who use bigger hooks, but I've never found that I needed to go up any bigger than an 8. So anyway, 6, 7, 8, that's all you need as far as the hooks go. But getting back to the weights, I see a lot of people trying to cast their rods out, and it seems like they're trying to cast them 1/2 mile, and there's no reason to try and do that. You want just enough weight on there, obviously, to keep that bait right there in that spot on the bottom. But when you put your rod in the rod holder, you just want enough weight to keep that line tight. Doesn't have to be super tight. It can have a little bit of slack in there, but just use enough weight to keep that line tight. And I kind of show you what I'm talking about. This is a 4 ounce weight, and I'm using my cell phone here, so it might be hard for me to try to compare this, but I want you to look at the difference. I mean, that's pretty much with the bead in the middle. That's bigger than both my weights that I have on there. And the problem with using this when you don't need to use it is when the catfish, striper, whatever, because a lot of times I go out catfishing with cut bait and live bait and I end up catching stripers, but when they take off with it and run, that weight, if you're using too much weight, it's just going to jerk it right out of their mouth. The only time I'm going to use heavy weights is if I'm fishing somewhere where there's a lot of current, and obviously you're going to need a lot heavier of weights to keep it on the bottom, but just don't use too much weight. Don't try to sling it out there 200 yards. Just a nice smooth cast, use the right amount of weight, will really go a long ways. But the reason I like this setup, and I could just use line and not use my braided line. But the reason I like this setup right here is it keeps the weights away from the bait. If I were to not use this braided line and this swivel and just tie a hook straight to my line, and obviously that's going to go right down to the hook, and it's going to be right there where the bait is. I try to keep a separation. I don't know how much that is. I'd say that's close to a foot. I want to keep my weights away from my bait. I've fished enough to know that I've missed a lot of fish because them weights will get down here and they'll get right on that hook. And in my opinion, I think it distracts the fish. So I try to keep these weights. I'm not gonna say as far away as possible, but that's a good distance right there. That's right at a foot. And again, that's 15-pound test line. Weight, swivel, braided line, which is 30-pound test, down to my hook. And I like using that braided line. That's 30-pound test braided line. I like using that because it is hard. It is hard to lose a fish on 30-pound braided line or braided line in general. And this line's actually kind of a greenish color, kind of resembles like algae on the bottom of the lake. Kind of blends in with it. And again, that goes hand in hand with keeping the weights away. I want to keep the weights away from my bait, and I want to keep what's in between the weight and my bait as natural color as possible. And I don't do it. I've seen people do it. They'll get green markers or whatever and stuff like this. They'll touch up with their green markers, especially if they're fishing in a lake where they know there's algae on the bottom. That'll blend right in with it. But I personally don't do that. But I do think it's important to keep your weights about a foot away from your bait. That way, you know that, hopefully more than likely it's not close enough to distract the fish. And that's how I bottom fish. Now that's the reason I'm using this setup is because I ran out of what I usually use, but I do have one I'm going to show you. But that's a good way to bottom fish. Simple. Now, what I like to use, and these are cheap, these are at Walmart. This is a one tie setup. Now I do put an extra weight on this. This is what you buy right here, okay? From that swivel down to that hook attachment is all one piece. All you do is make one tie to that swivel. And this, again, you can change the hooks out and you put your hook on. That's all you do. But I add one weight to it on top here on these rods with this lever action bait caster, because I don't feel like I can get it out far enough with the weight that comes with it. So I'll put just, you don't have to use a heavy one, obviously, but I'll put a weight on top just to help me get it out there a little bit further. I can cast this rod about 40 yards. If I took this weight off, believe it or not, probably 25 to 30 is about all I'm going to get. So that's why I put this on there. It just helps me get a little more distance. But this is one piece. Swivel, bead, weight, bead, all the way down to your hook attachment. You can get a 2-pack for $2 at Walmart. And I really love this setup because, for one, if you get snagged, hung, and you got to re-bait up or redo your line, it doesn't take a lot of your time up. It's just a great setup to use when you're bottom fishing. That's what I highly recommend, that setup. And this is the beauty of fishing, getting the line tangled up. But anyways, I'll show you one more time. Starts with your swivel, comes down to your bead, weight in your bead, and then comes all the way down. They don't come with the hook, obviously, but this, like I said before, you can change the hooks out. This is all one piece, and I just cuts down your time from having to get your rods in the water, because if your rods aren't in the water, you're not gonna catch any fish. So, getting back to weights and baits. Like I said before, don't use too much weight. If you're fishing in a lake and there's pretty much no current, use obviously the bare minimum amount of weight as you have to. You just want enough weight to keep that line tight when it's in the rod holder. If you're fishing in current, you know, obviously you gotta step up the weight, but I wouldn't, even with that being said, I wouldn't go excessive with it. You just want to use enough to keep that bait on the bottom and tension on the line when it's in the rod holder. Too much weight, fish takes off with it. It's probably going to pull it out of its mouth. Those are things a lot of people, just don't know. And it's costing them fish. It's costing me fish. Now getting to baits, I went over the floats. I'm going to do a video later on how to put the float on, because I think a lot of you will have a lot of fun using these Billy Bob floats out there catfishing, where you can set the depth, especially this time of year when you can find them in shallow water. It's just a lot of fun catching them with those Billy Bob floats. Getting to your baits, like I said, I don't know if I said it early in the video, but I got 4 Ziploc bags in the freezer full of brim. Now around here, brim, bluegill, I'm not sure if you're supposed to use crappie or not. I don't know if that's illegal, but I'll just leave that at that. But I got 4 bags of brim in my freezer. I like to let my brim sit out for 24 hours. Obviously you want a bucket with a lid on it, or something with a lid on it, or you're just gonna get ate up with flies. But I'll say I go fishing that morning, I always take me a little small micro rod with me. I'll buy me some crickets or some night crawlers, and while my rods are out there, I'll do a little bit of brim fishing, just to keep my bait stocked up. But what I'll do is I'll catch them in my buckets inside that I have. They actually sell them at Walmart for $2. But it's a bucket with a lid. It's got some holes on top. But I like to leave my brim in there for 24 hours. And then once I leave them, and once they've been in there for 24 hours, I'll take them out, put them in my bags, and freeze them. What does that do, leaving them out 24 hours? Well, I'm not cutting them. I'm not, pre-cutting my brim. I'm just letting them sit in the bucket, just as I caught them. It causes them, obviously, to have a pretty bad odor. All the blood, the oils stay in it. And then I freeze them. Now, I found, not completely frozen, but not all the way thawed out, is about how I like to put it on the hook. So if I go fishing that morning, I'll take it out 30 minutes before I leave. Get to the lake, pond, river, wherever you're going, they should be somewhat thawed out, and that's how I like to fish them. Because once it hits the water, it slowly thaws out, and it's slowly allowing the blood to come out and the oils to come out, instead of it all coming out at one time. I've caught a lot of fish that way. I'm not gonna say it's a secret, because a lot of people do it, but that's a good way to do it. Catch your brim, put them in a bucket with a lid, let them sit for 24 hours, freeze them, take them out 30 minutes to an hour before you leave to go fishing, and then when you get there, they're still gonna be somewhat frozen. Still cut them up, throw them out just like that. Is a really good way to attract in some fish. But chicken livers, I see a lot of people using them. I hate chicken livers. I'm not gonna lie to you. I hate them. You can get a lot quicker of a bite off the chicken liver most of the time than you are with cut bait or live bait. Sometimes it just takes time. And that's the difference between fishing for you smaller cats and your bigger cats. Some people don't like sitting there waiting 30 minutes, 45 minutes for something to possibly hit your cut bait or live bait that you got out there. But chicken livers, for the most part, is not what you want to use when you're going big cat fishing. Remember that. Leave the chicken livers at home, or if you want to take them with you to try to catch some brim with them, I guess that's fine. But if you want to go out to catch your bigger catch, 15 pounds and above, chicken livers is not the way to go. Use your cut bait, your brim, bluegill, skipjack, herring. I got a bait shop right above my house that sells herring. Obviously, they're frozen, but I've had a lot of success off of herring on the Billy Bob float. So, you know, and I've ran across a lot of people fishing that, you know, they'll see me throw out my bait and I say, man, that's a big chunk of fish you're throwing out there. How you going to catch something? But, you know, you can catch slabs of bluegill. Now, that's really not what you're looking for. You're looking for hand size brim, or smaller. You know, I got some slabs of bluegill in the freezer. That the heads of them things are pretty big, and you know, probably even for a catfish around 10 pounds would be hard for it to get in the mouth. So I try to catch hand size and smaller, but obviously if I catch slabs, I'm going to keep them, because you can never have too much bait. But like I said, 6/0, 7/0, 8/0 hook. It's a great size hook. If you're going to use a brim head, hook it through the eyes. If you're going to use the body, hook it through the top of the fin. One thing I like to do with the body section of a brim is I'll take my fillet knife or my scissors and I actually cut the fin off. The only reason I do it, I've never had nobody tell me I should do it. I've never seen a video tell me I should do it. But I was just thinking that when a catfish goes and attacks it, those fins on top of those brim are very sharp, and that might be a deterrent to them when they go and attack that bait and feel something sharp on it. So I cut the fins off of it, cast out that way. But cut bait, herring, skipjack, stuff like that's what you need to be using. And I'm not talking about using chunks, you know, half the size of your hand. You know, just 2 inches by 2 inches, or 1.5 by 1.5 piece of bait. You know, because you can buy you frozen skipjack that gets pretty big, and obviously you don't want to divide that into just 2 pieces. You can probably get 4, 5, 6 good pieces of bait out of that. But just a hand-sized brim, for me, I get 2 pieces off because I cut the tail off and use the head and the body section. But you know, just 1.5 to 2 inch long chunks of bait is about all you need. Now, going out to your lakes, your rivers, wherever you're gonna go, even your dreaded pay ponds where people cast on top of you all day or cross up your lines all day. When you get out there to your lakes and your rivers, don't run to the deepest part. That's something I see all the time. It's people in the deepest part of the lakes. Look for channels. Look for parts of the lakes where maybe a river runs into it, a creek runs into it. If you can find a cove, especially in the springtime, if you can find a cove that has a natural spring that runs into it, or like I said, maybe just a small river that runs into it, that's a good spot to be in the springtime. And still fish the same way with the float or on the bottom, still using cut bait. Because of the water temperature, they're easing in there, and if you can find a spot on the lake where a river runs into it or a creek, once those fish move in to get into warmer water, they're gonna feed off the small bait that's coming out of these creeks, and this time of year, that's what you're looking for. So don't hop on your boat and go out there and drop straight down into 80 foot of water. Um, find you a cove, find you a section that's, you know, I would say 20 foot or less this time of the year if possible. I mean, some lakes don't even get 20 foot deep around here. Some get really deep, but find you a cove, find you something where a creek feeds off into it, and that's a good area. I'm gonna post some videos. I think I got about 12 of fishing a cove on Lake Hartwell, right around the Seneca River, where I caught 9 cats the other day in a 4-hour span, with the smallest one being 16 and some odd ounces, the biggest one being 36. And that's where they're at right now. And like I said, as it warms up, obviously they're gonna start creeping back out in the deeper water. But even in the summertime, at nighttime, early morning time, they're still gonna venture into these shallow waters to go after the swim baits, the small baits, the shad and stuff that's in the water, and brim. So, you know, and like I said, there's just a lot of people who get confused on catfishing and think that they have to use chicken livers or night crawlers. I haven't used chicken livers or night crawlers to catch big catfish in my life. I'm not saying that you can. I've seen people do it, but not nearly as a high rate as if you're using cut bait, cut brim, skipjack, herring, whatever. That's where you're going to catch your bigger cats at. We're not going to get into summertime fishing right now because it's not summertime. Once it gets warm enough, I'll do some videos on that. Right now, we're just shallow water fishing. And I went over some of my setups with you, as far as not using too much weight. The weights that I use, the float, when I fish with my Billy Bob float, on the benefits of using that. And also, when you go out and you're cut bait fishing, I usually give it 30 minutes. About every 30 minutes is when I'll, somewhere around there. I mean, it depends. Maybe 45 at the most. You want to reel in, check your bait, make sure, because turtles will get a hold of it and just tear it all to hell. So, or you may have gotten a couple of bites that you didn't see, and before you know it, your body section has just a little piece on it. So 30 to 45 minutes, check your baits, throw them back out. That's something that helps. Just don't let it sit there for hours on end. Now, if you're fishing with 3 or 4 rods and you got a good chunk out there that's a real bloody piece, yeah, you can let that one sit for a while. But I would check them every 30 to 45 minutes. Other than that, go out there and catch these fish. I'm going to upload some videos and show you, they're there, and you can catch them. You don't have to settle for these small ones. You can go out there and have some fun and get into one of these big blues or flatheads. I prefer flatheads, but they're a little bit harder to catch. But like I said, my record is 46 pounds, 12-ounce blue that I caught at the Seneca River, which is pretty much is Lake Hartwell. I mean, I wasn't far from where the Seneca River and Hartwell start to join up, and Lake Hartwell has massive cats in there. So does Jocassee and Kiwi. But there's a lot of these lakes and rivers around here that's you would look at and think, man, there's no way there's big fish in here, but there is. I live 3 miles from Saluda Lake, and it's a real shallow lake. The deepest part of it's 36 foot, but I would say 80% of that lake is really around 8 foot or lower. And I've caught some really good sized catfish out of there. The river part is where I've caught the biggest ones at. I caught a 28-pound flathead out of the Saluda River in a section that was probably 20 yards wide and 5 foot deep. And you know, there's spots that you look at and you just disregard when that's where you should be fishing at. So just remember, if you're bottom fishing for catfish, don't use too much weight. Try to keep your weights as far away from your hook and your bait as possible, like I showed you before. If you're fishing with the float, which I do need to upload a video of how to put the float on the correct way, make sure the bead's touching the float. If it's not, then you're still bottom fishing. You don't want to bottom fish with a float. That defeats the purpose. This time of year, still find the shallow water. Find a creek. If you had a lake, find a creek that's running into it, a river that's running into it, and just fish that section because they're going to be there at some point to feed. But anyways, this is Catfish Todd Murphy signing out, and we'll be doing another video on how to put those floats on. I'm going to upload some videos of the fish that I caught, how I caught them, and I will be going out on another catfishing trip Saturday. And I'm going to go live. That way you can actually watch me in live time, because I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree. I'm not on here wanting people to think I'm the catfish king, because I'm not. But I catch a lot of catfish. I catch a lot of big catfish, and I'm just a simple guy that watched some guys on YouTube that really didn't get in the detail like this on how they rig their stuff up, you know, where they can buy their stuff at, you know, that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and just I'm really just here trying to help people catch bigger fish and show them that it's not as hard as it may seem. Now I will tell you this: there's going to be days you're going to get skunked, and when you're fishing for bigger cats, it's not like going out to your pay ponds with chicken liver and catch them every time they hit the water. You know, I've sat there for 4 and 5 hours and not catch anything, and then have a 2-hour span where I catch 4 or 5 catfish and big catfish. So you have to be patient when you're cut bait fishing, live bait fishing. Sometimes you can go and it's just, you know, they're on fire, and there's other days they're slow, and there's some days you're not going to catch any. But the purpose of me doing this channel is to show you that it's not as expensive as you may think. It's not as difficult as you may think. And I just want to help people with how to set up your rods for bottom fishing, float fishing for catfish, what baits to use, where to fish at certain times of the year. But anyways, this is Catfish Todd Murphy signing out. Go Gamecocks.